I made a last-minute decision. That's not true. I've planned it for a while. To add an additional reading from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 4 and 4 through 19, the New Revised Standard Version, and a touch of the Reverend Byron Tyler Cole's version. Because when you can read dead languages or other languages, you can do stuff like that. In the beginning, when God herself created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, covered in shadow and the face of the deep, while a wind from God themselves swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. God saw that the light was real good. And God separated the light from the shadow. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. And let them be signs for the seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And so it was. God herself made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and to separate the light from the shadow. And God themselves saw that it was good. God themselves saw that it was really good. And there was evening, and there was morning on the fourth day. Thus ends our reading. Good morning, church. I am the Reverend Byron Tyler Coles. I use they, he pronouns, and a member of your Southern Region staff. And for those of you who might know me, I was a baby seminarian the last time I was here. So it is a blessing and a gift not only to be invited back to share and worship this morning, but to see many faces that I recognize, and to see many faces and roles that were not once there. So, hi, Reverend Wesley. It's good to see you here. It is good to be with you all. As we continue onward in the ever unfolding and frankly exhausting journey that is the endemic, coupled with personal and societal happenings of all sorts, what are we to do? What are we to do with ourselves, with our communities, with the very stories we were raised to know as true, big T, but have grown to realize don't fully encompass the truth? What are we doing? What do we do in these moments of tenderness and calamity, of frustration and joy in the presence of both stillness and the hustle and bustle of our lives, when so many things have either changed or need to change? What are we to do? As we live into these all too real questions, I offer up this morning's homily entitled Ministry at the Beginning of the World. If you are like me, maybe you remember the beginning of lockdown and all those feelings that it brought with it. The anxiety, the loneliness, the anger and the sorrow, the boredom maybe, the exhaustion. It must have been the first full week during lockdown, as I recall struggling with my day-to-day routine. On one of those such mornings, I was looking out of my apartment window over Cameron Run, a tributary that feeds into the mighty and murky Potomac River. As I clutched my coffee cup to my chest, I blurted out, "I wasn't prepared for this." My then roommate, Julia, sitting just across the living room, looked up from her phone and said, "Tyler, Ready for what? I gestured to the window and said, this. I wasn't ready for this. I was ready for the apocalypse. You know, for the doom and gloom, the gnashing of teeth, the fire and brimstone, maybe a zombie or two. I was not ready. I was not ready for a beautiful spring day. There I was, struggling to make sense of the world that I had come to know as it began to fracture and fissure under the pressure of the pandemic and all that it brought with it. In those early weeks and months, I struggled. We struggled. We struggled as our loved ones became sick, as we cared for them and even became sick ourselves. We wrestled with the weight of the world as it played out on the evening news and on social media. We gave it the best we could as we attempted to keep some sense of normalcy. And as time went on, we began to hear and maybe even utter, and it's okay if you did, I promise, how we just wanted things to, go back to normal. Back to the way things were before the virus, before social distancing, before masking, before wiping down groceries, before fighting over toilet paper and paper towels, before worrying about air quality and purities, before inflation, and even before figuring out how to make multi-platform church and school work. The before times. But as our habit, as creatures of habit, when reflecting on the past, we so often do so in dichotomies. That is to say, when we think back on past events, we tend to place them solidly in the camps of either totally good or totally bad, given our experiences of them. And as I think back on those days, months, and years before the arrival of the pandemic, I'm left wondering what was so wholly good about them in which we would even want to go back to them. Now I know. I know and I honor that when we say that we wish to return to the before times, what we are doing is signaling about how heavy and broken and weary our hearts are right now. How we wish we didn't have to concern ourselves with the endemic and the total disruption that is still having on our lives right now. But how many times in those before times, and ever since then, have we thought to ourselves, this is it. This is the end. It is all over. Surely it is all done now. And casually naming a few, I can recall the chaos of Y2K. And if you weren't around or conscious enough at the moment, that's when the calendar went from 99 to 2000. Party like it's 1999. And we were fighting over Pepsis and emptying out our bank accounts. What is that going to do in the end of the world? Or, of course, there's, the Bush administration, or the Obama administration, or the Trump administration. Yes. And then, of course, there is the pandemic itself, and the countless and ongoing wars, and the rise and fall of the economy, the housing bubble bursting, the endless accounts of mass gun violence and devastating wildfires, and the list goes on and on and on. But as a religious people who routinely gather to wrestle with truth, both new and old, we are taught time and time again in so many ways that the ending of one thing is the beginning of something else. In the sacred story from Genesis, the first of two creation stories that we find there, We hear the detailed motions in which God herself proceeds to bring creation into being by breathing life over the murky waters and separating them from what would become the earth. It is the creative imagination and the poetic genius of the ancient Israelites as they sought to craft meaning out of the heat and the force, the swirling gases and minerals that would become our galaxy. It places humanity not at the center, but as participants alongside the heavens and the earth, the shadowy waters and the moving airways, and of course a multitude of animals, because we can't leave out the puppy dogs and the kittens, y'all. And with no preface and with no explanation given, the plot line of existence just begins. It begins in full order. After all, this is what many of us were taught as the truth, after all, right? God creates, full stop. And when said more frankly, God creates from nothing. Ex nihilo, if you want an overpriced seminary word. But I still have feelings. But when we turn our hearts and attention to the words more closely in the text, we notice that God himself did not create the cosmos and everything that exists within it from nothing, but God created existence from what was already on hand. With that which already existed, the seemingly separate parts, maybe even the broken parts from the previous creation. There is no question that we each have faced our own endings before. And maybe some of those endings felt apocalyptic. But unlike what I was prepared for during the earliest moments of lockdown, and have since been reminded, endings can rarely be prepared for. And when they do arrive, they appear in ways different from what we expected them to be. And sometimes those endings and revelations don't come from outside forces, but are truly self-induced. And Cheers to the World, Elba Morales writes, sometimes we orchestrate the end of our own worlds. The decision to leave a toxic job, saying yes and trusting a new love, and admitting that we need help. There is blessedness in new beginnings. There is blessedness no matter how difficult they may be or how they come about. And as change is the one and only real constant, we must meet these moments with as much heart as we can muster from within ourselves and can assemble from those around us. For we can play an intentional role in our own new beginnings. We are not powerless, y'all. We are not powerless. I don't care if you hear anything else from me or from us today. I want you to know the truth that we are not powerless. As Dr. Elias Ortega, president of Meadville Lombard Theological School, says, facing apocalypse with courage and faith is understanding that it reveals other possible ways of being, of acting, of living in the world while we still have time. In full truth, who we once were is no more. The world as it used to be is gone. For change is constant in the great river of being, for following life is death, and surely following death is life again. Winter gives way to spring. The setting sun gives way to the full moon, and the low tide follows once the water crests upon the shore. But the good news, because there is actually always good news. The good news in all of this is that we are wading through the waters and are creating new pathways with old pieces every day. But we must do so with great intention and imagination, and not just for the sake of survival and doing the same old, same old. This intentional act of imagination requires that we honor all that has come to pass, to take stock of how previous iterations have shaped us, and then to manifest a new way that honors all of creation going forward. Here then, as the prophet and sage Adrienne Marie Brown often says, we must create lives worthy of living. And likewise, we must create communities, much like the church is tasked. We must create communities worthy of being a part of. For here we become the co-creation lab of existence, creating ways of deep connection and well-being, bound together in care that can hold us through all the endings and new beginnings, the pandemics and apocalypses, the twists and turns to come. Because, y'all, there will be some plot twists still to come. As we move into this next chapter, into this new world becoming, we must do so guided by a faith anchored and clear and bold values. In my own faithful journey as a UU, in my ministry with other Unitarian Universalists, I detect that we will have to go forward with 3 guides for our journey ahead, lest we will be sucked back in, pulled back in, dragged back down into the before times. So if you have them pens, pull them out. I know y'all writing people. I know y'all. So our first guide, slowing down to start small. Slowing down to start small. I'm going to say it one more time because some of us are chronically addicted to doing the most. Slowing down to start small. As we venture into this new world becoming, let us go slow and move with exacting precision. We have been trained to be and work at a fever's pace. While capitalism is crumbling, it is not yet dead in this new world. But the spirit of life, God herself, love, I believe, is much stronger because it has to be stronger. And it is beckoning us to move in different ways. And to realize that the God of death, known in the form of free market capitalism, has an offertory which is too heavy a burden to bear. It will not save us, y'all. By slowing down, we can begin to build up the life-giving pathways which meet the needs of today, not yesterday, in more sustainable ways. No more quick fixes for the sake of convenience. Our second guide, relationships. Relationships. You better turn to your neighbor and say hello. Oh, I mean it. Say hello. We have come accustomed to and having begun to expect that relationships should be connections of expediency. Superficial at least and vapid at most. In this new world, we must, as a people of faith who have the audacity to proclaim the power and truth that is our interdependence, we must let our relationships be both our teacher and our succor for what is to come. Relationships of deep meaning will challenge us to grow and will serve as our North Star as we strive towards liberation. And our last guide, depth over width. Depth over width. Y'all, we got to go deep. In the before times, we were instructed that we must always build wide, go wide, be wide, all of which whispered, ignore the depths of things. But if the pandemic has shown us anything, such an approach to life, such an approach to our relationships, to our communities, to our churches, to our own spiritual journeys, width isn't sustainable, let alone useful for when the going gets tough. After all, how many of them friends that you thought you were good friends with did you hear from during the hardness of the pandemic? Did your job really care about you when you got sick? Was the church present for you when you needed them the most? When we engage the depths of the seas or the heights of the heavens, then we are able to fully know of nuances and complexities. There we can plant our roots deep in the nourishing earth as it provides sustenance and grounding. There we can send our branches towards the heavens as it provides awe and inspiration. Go deep, y'all. As elders and teachers of our traditions have reminded us throughout the ages, we are all ministers. Hi, colleagues. We are all ministers. We are called to collectively carry the load of life, for doing so makes the burden of life much lighter. And in that, we must also work to create a world where there is less and less and less burden to bear all together. In this new world, following all that has perished, following that all that has, and even is still being lost, we must faithfully meet this apocalyptic moment with as much courage as we can. We must meet this moment with what Walter Brueggemann calls a prophetic imagination. That is, we must call to mind and body and soul a vision of a new world where mutuality and care and generosity are central to our very being, as they give shape to that holy thing called love, which is at the center, after all. For we can shape the next creation. We are not powerless in the narrative of our own lives. After all, we are God's co-creators, after all. For as the writer and sage Grace Lee Boggs once said, we must transform ourselves to transform the world. For truly, there is no better time than this to drink deeply of the mystery of transformation. And in doing so, may we prophetically minister to the world becoming. May it be so. Amen.